What is up, everybody, and welcome back to Tar Heel Illustrated.com. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me as he always does, it's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, exciting time of the year for us is the Carolina football show is officially back, and that's what we're here for. It feels like it's been a while. I was trying to remember the last time we did a Carolina football show. We've obviously been doing drops on football and other things all summer, but
I think we did one in May.
I think it's sooner than I thought. We did
a football show and a basketball show like in late, third week of May, I think was our last one.
Mm-hmm. And we're back with it now because, as everybody knows, football season is right around the corner, only a couple weeks away. And I'm looking at the itinerary kind of, AJ, of the things we're going to talk about. And there's a lot of things to hit on. And I think that just illustrates where we are right now and the time of year we're in currently. So I want to start with injury news, injury related items, because I do think those are things that are kind of a big focus and kind of top of mind with people right now, especially when you look at some of the guys, particularly on defense that are out. Lejon Cavazos, cornerback, was supposed to be kind of that fourth guy in the rotation. Announced during Mac Brown's press conference a couple of days ago that he's only out 4 to 6 weeks. So that was a positive, as he said they were worried that could be more of a long-term injury. So 4 to 6 weeks, not bad. Yeah. RJ Grigsby also making progress, kind of the third team offensive line right now, at least before he got hurt, only out 4 to 6 weeks as well. So I think the staff is pretty, I'm not going to say pleased, but a little bit pleasantly surprised that the injuries weren't worse than they were, particularly with Cavazos. And just real quickly as well, DeAndre Boykin, Stick Lane, and Will Hardy are also still out, so you can hit on those as well. But again, a lot of guys on defense, a lot of guys kind of in that defensive back room, which seems like Carolina, for whatever reason, every year has a lot of injuries in the defensive back room, particularly at that cornerback room. So talk to me a little bit about Carolina's injury situation, because again, it's very defensive heavy, and I don't think that's necessarily what Carolina wanted going into the season.
No, I agree about the Cavazos. I think they were probably pleasantly, I don't want to say surprised. They were glad to see 4 to 6 weeks with him because he is the fourth corner. The third corner, by the way, is Tayon Holloway, who didn't play a snap last year. The other two are Marcus Allen, who didn't play till late in the year, and then Elijah Uzzie, who was at East Tennessee State. That's their trio right now at corner. Notice that Armani Chapman is not in that mix. He started about 28 games at Virginia Tech. So right now, I think they're three corners they're very comfortable with: Holloway, Uzzie, and Marcus Allen. So getting Cavazos back mid to late September, maybe by the open date at the end of September, first week of October, probably is ideal for this program. They could get through to that point, and then they'll have a fourth guy. With Grigsby, he's a third-team offensive lineman, but he's the one true freshman on the offensive line that's got a lot of praise, both publicly and behind the scenes, off the record. So I think he's a guy that could have played himself into a second string spot, maybe gotten on the field in certain situations with lopsided games this year, get him some reps. He's probably a guy that they see as a 4-year player, maybe not a 5-year player. So getting him on the field and getting reps and progressing, maybe he can keep that track. The other three, very quickly, Boykins, I don't think is any concern. That's a long-term thing. The problem is that Stick Lane had been working a lot as the backup star, and he's also in the mix at safety, the kid from Georgia State. And what hurts with him is that they haven't seen him in pads yet. Mm-hmm. So he's new. He graduated in May from Georgia State. He's got 2 years of eligibility left. They have not seen him in pads yet, and here we are 2.5 weeks from the South Carolina game, and he's a guy that they were counting on. Mac has joked about he loves having a safety with the name Stick.
He has a heck of a name.
Because he sticks, right? He can stick people. But they don't have that. So there's some physicality they lose with Boykins. He's a very physical defensive back. Mm-hmm. Physicality with Lane. And then Hardy is someone that I think they expected him to be back now. And he's not. Mac told us after the first practice that they fully expect him to be ready to roll by the first game. Now they're 2.5 weeks away. Hardy still has not participated in practice. So I would say that there might be a little concern there because the timetable appears to have shifted. And that's never good when it shifts to be longer than shorter. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Those are three guys they need. Hardy and Boykins are starters.
Oh, absolutely.
And Lane is a guy that we get a lot of reps at star and at safety. So he's sort of a mock starter, if you will. could eventually be one too. So they need those three for sure.
Yeah, it's just it's a thinning out in the secondary again, and it seems like we've had this conversation every year. Mac Brown's been back for some reason. Now, again, usually it's been in the cornerback room for whatever reason. It's not so much that, but when you're talking about that star position, you're talking about that cornerback, you're talking about safety. It's just important guys that aren't participating right now, or timetable on when they might be back is still kind of up in the air, especially with a guy like Hardy, who you said is supposed to be back and just hasn't been. So I think that has to be a little bit of a concern for the staff right now, because you need those guys, and a defense that needs to improve this year needs to have his best players out there in order to do that. So I get where it can be a bit of a concern, not only for fans, but I know the staff has to be concerned right now too, a little bit.
The good thing, if you will, there's always whenever there's an injury, it opens up a door. That's Agreed. One of the neat things about sports, in football. So Caleb Costa, the true freshman, arrived this summer. He's got a lot of praise. Mm-hmm. He's playing. He popped to me when the practices I've been to. He's like, oh, okay, Caleb Costa. And then Max talked about him. G. Chiswick talked about him last week. And I always place importance on what coaches say when they're not specifically asked about someone, but they bring their name up. Mm-hmm. And if consistently it takes a while to bring up a kid's name, then okay, wait, that kid's not popping to them. So because he's not on the forefront of their thinking with that position group. Cost comes up all the time. And DJ Jones, I was watching DJ in the first practice playing a lot of the star. He was a running back, and they like him a lot. I just think that maybe he would be a backup everywhere in the secondary wherever he plays, but I think there's some fortification having a guy who's a team first dude, who's experienced as a college football player and has the willingness that DJ Jones does in order to perform. So that's kind of where they are at star. I would imagine if this is a longer term situation, you could see Don Chapman playing some there. He's played a little star in the past. I know they're working Elijah Huzzy out a little bit at star as well. So if you have to move a Huzzy to star, which I think they'd rather have him locked down at corner, but let's say for the sake of discussion, he goes to star and you run with Holloway and Allen at corner, that might be an option as well. They're not there yet. They still have 2.5 weeks before they play a game, but they definitely want to get Boykins back. Boykins is a guy that pound for pound might be the hardest hitter on defense. Mm-hmm. And he's a guy that made big plays last year. He consistently graded out well. So I think that he's a sort of an afterthought to a lot of people about how important he is on that defense, but he's a vitally important player over there.
Oh, yeah, he's one of the most important in my opinion. And like you said, a guy that he makes plays. So you need guys out there, playing, especially again on a defense that's trying to shed some negative narratives off of, that kind of came from last year. And hopefully they could do it, but they do need, I think, to be a little bit more healthy in the secondary to have a little bit better shot at making that sooner rather than later. But we'll see what happens, see how these guys continue to recover, and obviously see what happens in the season with some other guys potentially playing different positions that maybe they're not their number one position, but they can do. So a lot still to shake out on the injury front, and we'll see what happens. Moving on, AJ, let's talk about scrimmaging a little bit. Obviously kind of a scrimmage update here. Carolina did have a scrimmage in Keenan last Saturday, but not just building on that as well. They also did do a 16-play tempo at the end of Tuesday's practice as well. So obviously getting that in, that's important going into the season. You got to do some live action stuff to see who's actually ready, because, you can look good in a drill, but it is a big difference between doing a drill and doing it, when things are actually, going at 100% speed. So what updates have you heard from the staff and maybe from some of the players on how those scrimmages went, and what can you kind of fill us in on in terms of those?
75-play scrimmage Saturday, plus they did live special team stuff. So they did more live special team stuff Saturday. When I say live, I'm talking full speed, contact and everything than they've done since Mac returned. And there's just more physicality in camp. They're being smart with it, but there's more physicality because they want to get rid of the narrative about being soft. And I think the most interesting thing about when Mac brought that up in the spring, and I'll never forget sitting there in the front row of the press conference, and he said that, and he never deflected. He never said, that's not so. We aren't soft. We aren't not. Soft is not a way to describe us. Gosh, I got tongue tied there. He didn't do that at all.
Yeah, he owned it. Yeah.
He owned it and said, we got to change the narrative. So they've had a lot of contact and through the end of camp, they'll break here in a couple of days and then they start classes next week and they'll go into their in-season schedule more so practicing at 8 o'clock in the morning instead of 10 o'clock in the morning. But they had the 75 play scrimmage Saturday and it was very physical. I think that if you were to say who won, and this is just based on my interpretation of what everything I've been told, is that the defense won. Mm-hmm. There were only three explosive plays by the offense. The defense got sacks. They got TFLs. The problem is, Max, they allowed too many big runs. When big runs are 6, 7, 8, 9 yards, those are not explosive plays. But they did well. They kind of held the offense in check. They were very physical. Then what I think is really interesting, and this goes to what I was just saying about the soft part, the next day, normally they would take the day off after a full scrimmage like that, treat it almost like the day after a game. And I guess the day after games, they do practice, but it's more to get the webs out and the tightness out. Yeah. They had a full physical practice Sunday as well. And Max said the reason they did that was they got to separate. They got to find out who approached that practice with the same spirit they did the day before, the same excitement they did the day before. They've got to figure out the guys that are going to bring it and they're going to swing every time they need to swing, whether it's in the first quarter in September or the third quarter in late October. They got to know who those guys are. They got to know who they could trust to handle physicality and grind, because with the tempo offenses and clock's not stopping as much this year as they have in the past because of one of the rule changes. If you put guys out there on the field on defense, they may have to stay out there for 6, 7, 8 straight snaps. Who can handle it? Who can handle it from a stamina standpoint? Who can handle it from a physicality standpoint? So they're pushing them. They're pushing them a lot. And then they had the 16-play tempo thing on Tuesday. I believe there's another mock scrimmage here in the middle of the week, and then they'll have another full scrimmage probably on Saturday. They need to do that to separate. They need to do that for the depth chart. They need to do that to gauge everyone's course that they're on. And then I think they'll pull back. They'll get more skills oriented. They'll get healthy. And then late next week, they'll probably begin the process of preparing for South Carolina. So a lot of physicality, and it's good. This needs to be a more physical team. They know it. Everybody who watches them on a regular basis knows it. And I think that's been one of the themes so far of camp. They've had leadership, tremendous leadership. They have not had a lot of injuries. I know we've talked about some guys being out, but nothing serious has really occurred during fall camp, because Hamrick and Kanyuk were announced being out before fall camp started, and they've been very, very physical. So I like all of that being part of the narrative of fall camp so far.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it goes back to the attention to detail we talked about with some of the offseason movements we saw with staff, some of the coordinators coming in. And I think it's just, it's translated into fall camp too, with hitting more, trying to shed that narrative. Hey, we're going to scrimmage this day and we're going to do something the next day, because I need to figure out who's really with this and who can actually handle this. I think this is all positive things. This is all things you want to hear coming out of the program if you're a fan, because to me, Max said it, 9's not enough. And not only is he said 9's not enough, AJ, they're also putting things in motion to try to get to that 10+ win mark. They're not just saying 9's not enough and we're just going to do the same thing we did last year into this new year. No, we're focusing a little bit more attention to detail. I think it's huge. And I think it should pay off for North Carolina. It remains to be seen if it will. But I think what we're seeing and what we're hearing and what's actually going on during fall camp and even before that, with, again, like I mentioned with some of the hires, is a positive and a reason I think fans should be a little bit more optimistic about what could happen this season going into it.
Well, it's also a way to help build more depth, because they've got some true freshmen who are going to be in important roles on defense. Yeah. Amari Campbell is the primary backup inside linebacker, not Sebastian Cheeks, who we thought a month ago would be the guy. He missed pretty much all last season with an injury. He got injured very, very early, played 3 snaps on defense. Campbell's come in, very physical, loves to play. Mac was gushing about him after practice on Tuesday. Gene Chizik was very positive about him. Some of his teammates Power Eccles was talking about him about a week and a half ago about, man, this guy can play. Mac says he pops. So he's got to get used to playing college football. So you throw him into the fire in these scrimmages and have him bang one day, bang again the next day. They had Monday off, no practice. Tuesday, they get back at it and they do tempo banging. And so it's important for him. I mentioned Caleb Koss, true freshman. Taylor Holloway is a redshirt freshman, but he didn't get on the field last year. So when he plays against South Carolina, that'll be his first college snap. So they need to get some of these guys ready on that side of the ball. They want more depth on that side of the ball so they can freely substitute throughout the course of the game to keep guys fresh. And there's more question marks on that side of the ball because the offense is kind of set in a lot of ways. There's a lot of the same bodies that were there a year ago offensively. There's some movement going on that we can hit on in a few minutes, but I think a lot of this is about getting guys ready on defense too. So every time Amari Campbell takes a 100% full speed, full contact snap in practice, that gets him one play closer to being able to sub for Power and Cedric. And Max said he is the sub for Power and Cedric. If he goes in for Power, then he plays the Power spot. If he goes in for Cedric, Power will move into Cedric's spot, and then he'll play in Power side. So he's more the Power Eccles spot guy, but he could play both if he had to. If both of them went down and they put Cheeks out there, he could, Campbell could play either one of those inside linebacker spots.
That's positive because, depth's something we've talked about really all offseason with the linebacker, a little bit of a concern. Yeah. But someone stepping up in there and especially a guy like him who's extremely talented, I think is a positive. Hopefully some other guys behind him, Deuce Caldwell, Sebastian Cheeks continue to kind of step up as well because they do need depth at linebacker. Power and Cedric are fantastic linebackers, but
I think it's coming. In every snap, it's coming there. Caleb Lavalley as well. There's some positive things about him. He's the true freshman who just showed up. And I think they're recruiting well at the position. I think they're really starting to figure out what they want and need in this defense at that spot. So, and they have pretty good, I don't know if you can hear the yard guys out there now, but
I can't.
They have, okay, that's good. They have Cedric and Power who, look, Chaz is still in the NFL. Gemmel's fringe. Cedric's going to play in the NFL. Power's going to play in the NFL. So they have an NFL pipeline culture at wide receiver. Boy, if you can create one at linebacker, that's a good place to be with that. And I think that's something that they might be in the process of doing right now.
100%. No doubt about it. Let's switch over to the offense real quick. I want to talk about George Pettaway for a quick second. A guy that's getting some work at the slot position now. I think we've talked about it a little bit this offseason and I think even Chip Lindsey, or maybe it was Matt, kind of mentioned it too over the last couple of weeks about how he's kind of their best running back in terms of running routes and catching balls out of the backfield. So it seems like they're wanting to get him involved more because it's a talented position group at running back. It's a pretty deep position group at running back, but they're still trying to figure out who's going to step up and be those guys. But it makes sense that they're kind of trying to get George Pettaway involved because of the skill sets that he brings running routes out of the backfield. So it seems like he's going to be more of a situational guy, but what can you tell us about Pettaway and how they're maybe hoping to utilize him going into the season?
Yeah, situational now. He's still got work to do, running between the tackles, being a physical guy going through there. But he's also a guy that you don't want to just have standing on the sideline because he can help you. He's someone that you get the ball in space, he can make people miss. He's got great, what I call dart ability. He's a guy that could get a little screen pass, see a lane, and boom, dart right through it and turn his with his nose pointed toward the end zone. He's got a gift being able to do that, so they want to utilize that. I thought it was interesting when Max said that, hey, he's lining up as a slot receiver. They've already got Kobe Paysour and Nate McCollum, who I think are going to start, and they're both slot receivers, but they've also worked on the outside as well. If you've got Tez Walker, and we're not really going to get too much into that because I addressed that in a podcast and a couple of articles and stuff. There's nothing really more we could add to the Tez Walker situation here in this podcast, but for the sake of discussion, if you've got Tez there and you've got Paysour and McCollum, you've got two slot guys that have to be draped. And then you've got to take the top of the defense off guy. So by putting Pettaway in there, it's another slot for teams to prepare for. And I think what's interesting is he can line up in the backfield as a running back, go in motion and shift into a slot spot and serve almost as a slot receiver. And also, if you remember, I love to point this out, but I'm going to go back to it again. Josh Downs' first touchdown at Carolina was a 75-yard play against Texas A&M in the Orange Bowl. And he started that play in the backfield. Lining up as a running back, and he went out and I think you could see Pettaway doing stuff like that. They got to get him on the field. He could be a playmaker for you. So you got to get playmakers on the field. And I think right now at the running back position, as much as they really wanted there to be separation, I think there's separations within the room as far as certain things guys could do. It's almost like you look at, if you're going to cook something for dinner and you look at the counter before you start cooking, you've got your onions over here and you've got your meat over here and you've got your rice over here. That running back room has got onions, it's got meat, it's got rice, it's got green peppers. It's not all put together yet, and there's just one or two things you're going to roll. It's not like it's a hot dog and a bun and you just roll with that. So I think right now you're going to see them utilize guys situationally because they all have skills that can help this team win. And I think what's encouraging for the people out there pulling for British Brooks is I thought Brooks was going to be an afterthought in that room when camp started. Everything I gauged coming into the season, conversations, everything else, and he was going to be a special teams guy. It's going to be emotional support. It's going to be a leader, sort of a mini coach in that room. But he's playing well. And you've got coaches going out of their way, Chip Lindsey and Mac Brown, to say that he's playing well. When they go out of their way to do that, when they're not asked about him, that's when you could gauge something from it. So I think right now they've got 5 running backs. Throw in Caleb Hood and throw in Elijah Green, all have unique skills, attributes that can help them in certain situations. And this running back room may take a while to sort itself out. Ideally, they want to have 2 guys and maybe a third, like a Petaway. He could be situational as a receiver or something like that. But, if they end up using all 5 during the course of the year, I wouldn't be all that surprised right now. I think that there's a giant question mark there, but it's a good question mark. It's not a bad question mark. Mm-hmm. It's a good problem to have because they've got a lot of answers in there. It's just a matter of who's going to separate, who can end up doing the most different things that they can keep on a field in a tempo drive where they take 8 snaps without the clock stopping. And that guy's got to be out there. So he's got to run between the tackles. He's got to run wide. He's got to pass block. He's got to be able to catch the ball. Who's that guy going to be? I don't think they know 100% yet.
Mm-hmm. We'll see how it plays out. A lot of tasty ingredients in that room, AJ. And if you can put it together correctly, you could have a pretty damn good dish. We'll see how it goes. But again, the ingredients are there. They just got to figure out how to put it together. Guys got to step up and show that they deserve to be playing snaps when the season comes. But again, we've talked about it. You want competition in rooms. Competition breeds success. It breeds a little bit more quality in what you're getting. If a guy knows he's the starting running back, you can kind of rest on your laurels a little bit. But when you got multiple guys kind of competing in there every single day, that's when you get the best out of players. So again, a really good problem, I think, for North Carolina to have. You'd rather it be like that than the opposite. Let's put it that way. So, yeah. Let's see how it continues to play out. Real quickly, a couple more things to hit on before we wrap this one up. Special teams. I know we hit on it a little bit from the scrimmage in terms of, special teams went fully live last Saturday during the scrimmage in Keenan. Punting game, from what we've heard, punting game, impressive. I think outstanding was the word used. And the place kicker game is been a bit inconsistent, which doesn't surprise me in some ways from what we saw during the spring a little bit too. I kind of figured that was going to be a position, even despite a guy like Ryan Coe coming in, that was going to take a little bit of time to really see who's the guy. But again, you hope Carolina doesn't have kicking issues going into the season, because it just seems like it's been a theme for the Tar Heels for the last few years for whatever reason. But what updates can you give us on special teams?
It was a theme late last season. I think Burnett was pretty solid before that. Grayson Atkins was solid, but they need to be better. If you're going to contend for something significant, you need to be better than solid at place kicker. Mm-hmm. And it's not just the extra points and field goals. It's also kickoff. One of the things they lost when Jonathan Kim hit the portal last year after the 4th game was he was almost a lock for a touchback. Mm-hmm. And Noah Burnett had a much lower touchback ratio percentage than Jonathan Kim did. Ryan Coe is a step up in that direction. I would expect, and I don't know for sure, Coe will probably be the kickoff guy. So the battle is, because he's got a stronger leg. He had a pretty high percentage of touchbacks at Cincinnati. So who's going to be the place kicker? When I've watched them, they both have made every kick. Now, last week in the full pads practice that I was at, they went right into that right away, and Burnett went first, which surprised me, because what you get into about your 6th, 7th, 8th practice, all the drills, whatever they do, it's always in rotation order of whatever the depth chart says. But the depth chart changes every day. sometimes a couple times a day. So people should understand that too. So that's why I always say this is a loose depth chart whenever I report on depth charts and stuff. But I thought it was interesting. Burnett went first. He made all 4 field goals. The fourth one was from 42. They get into it. Boom. These are all game winners. And they do 4 field goals in a minute and a half, if even that, not even a minute and a half. So it's boom, boom, boom. And they simulate the rushed scenario of getting your unit on the field and getting that ball snapped and getting the kick up in time to win the game, so to speak. Both of them made all those kicks. But the fact that Ryan Coe hasn't yet definitively beaten out Noah Burnett, I don't know if that means that Noah Burnett's just doing a lot better or Ryan Coe's struggling. Based on what Max said, I would probably lean toward Ryan Coe hasn't been as efficient as they need him to be. And that's an important thing because they lost the NC State game and they lost the Oregon game last year because of missed field goals. They lost for a lot of reasons. It wasn't just but the missed field goals and the time that they were missed really, really hurt. So they need to be better there. If you're going to contend for something significant, you've got to be better. You've got to be really good and really efficient, and you got to be dependable in that spot. So I think that there is a little bit of concern there right now.
Agreed. Yeah, especially that State game. It wasn't like it was a 58-yarder. And it was one that Burnett should have made, and it just wasn't even close. So, you do need to get that fixed because those are the fine margins in football, and those are the fine margins when you're trying to be, again, a team in a program where 9 wins isn't enough. You got to be consistent in that special teams, and especially in that kicking games, because as we've seen, AJ, it can win you games and it can also very easily lose you games. So hopefully that position group gets situated, and you would think Ryan Coe would ultimately be the guy, but again, we don't know. And from what you're telling me, it seems like Carolina's staff sure isn't really sure who the number 1 guy might be. So AJ, last thing, we're in this on some positive in terms of talking about the defense. We got 4 young defensive names to kind of keep an eye on that we've heard throughout fall camp. I think we've hit on a few already throughout this, but we'll just kind of reiterate it. 2 true freshmen, 1 redshirt freshman, Tayon Holloway, Bo Atkinson, Amari Campbell, and Caleb Cost as well. So again, those are names that we've heard a lot about, seem to be guys that are kind of stepping up a little bit. And to me, again, that's a positive when you can have young guys come in and not only, again, you've hit on it a few times in this episode, guys you don't have to really ask about, but they're brought up during these press conferences. Those are the things you can really key in on and say, okay, well, nobody asked you about him, so why are you talking about him? You must be pleased with something you're seeing. So tell me about those guys. I know we've hit on them a little bit, but I think when you can have young guys stepping up on defense, that's only a positive going into the season.
Well, we hit on 3 of them, so I'll go to Atkinson.
Yeah.
And Bo Atkinson jumped out at me last spring, and you and I talked about him last spring. And then the first practice, one of the first position groups I went and watched were defensive ends, defensive linemen. He just looks the part.
Yeah.
He's got good footwork. He was a tight end in high school, a good one. He could have played tight end in college. He just looks the part. And then when they got into full pads, I went right over. I shot a little video. It's not an extensive drill, but it's something. And you could sort of see the guys. And I'm a big body language, mannerism guy. I like to see how they comport themselves in between reps and drills. And Atkinson's a dialed-in guy, and he kind of looks a little bit more of a throwback defensive end. I'm not sure why I think that. He just kind of reminds me of a guy that's able to get up into a tackle, sort of make the tackle go upright, and then read and react. And that's a little bit more what football was back in the day. And, hands and just rely on your instincts and that kind of thing. He just looks like a guy that can do those things. Now, Des Evans is getting a ton of positives, nothing but rave stuff about how Des has improved his game. Gene Chizik says he expects, I'm getting somewhere with this, how he expects Des to just have a monster season. But Max said Tuesday, Bo Atkinson's, he's there. He's pushing. He's going to get on the field. So the good thing is for Carolina, if Des is a monster, you're not going to ask him to play 55 snaps to be a monster. Maybe he's a better monster at 40 snaps, 42 snaps. So suddenly Bo Atkinson maybe can give them 15 to 20. And that's going to make Des consistently better throughout the game. He'll be fresher late and be able to make plays late. So Bo Atkinson can actually make Des Evans better because he'll be fresher. And they'll be strong even when Atkinson's in the game because he plays the run well. He can get to the quarterback some. He's one of those defensive ends that I could see batting down a pass as he bull rushes a quarterback or something like that. So keep an eye out for Atkinson. Keep an eye out for Cost. Keep an eye out for Campbell for sure, and also Holloway. I think Atkinson, Campbell, and Holloway will play. Now, how reluctant is Tommy Thigpen to put in a reserve linebacker? I mean, do you really want to pull Cedric Gray or Power Eckers off the field?
Yeah.
They've already proven they can give you 1,000 snaps. They basically got close to that last year. Cedric did. Power was at around 900. So Campbell may not play as much. And in the case of Caleb Cost, a lot of that depends on where Boykins and Stick Lane are. But absolutely, Atkins and Holloway are going to get on the field in defense. So Carolina fans need to get ready for that, get used to their names, and be on the lookout for them early in the South Carolina game. I think they're both going to play a decent amount. I think they're going to help this team. Agreed,
man. The more the merrier, for sure. And I think that's a good place to wrap this one up, guys. A lot of different things we hit on in this football show. Excited to be back with an episode of the football show. And again, a lot of positives, some things that are still a little bit of a concern, still some question marks around, but that's kind of what you expect in the middle of fall camp and going in, not too long away from really starting to prepare for South Carolina, like AJ mentioned a little bit earlier on in this show. So make sure you keep it locked to TarHeelIllustrated.com for all your coverage of Carolina football, basketball, and recruiting. You can become a Carolina Insider too as well for just $8.33 a month. Links in the description below. Come sign up. I know I say it a lot, but it really is a great time to do so because there's just so much going on, especially a lot of the football behind the scenes stuff that we don't necessarily put out as free content or is just strictly in the message boards. Got to be a premium member to get that and get access to that. Again, just sign up, $8.33 a month. Links in the description below. We'll take you right over there to sign up, and you can become a Carolina Insider too. Come join our awesome community over there. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another episode of the UNC Football Show. Appreciate y'all watching. Make sure you like the video below, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell too. See it every single time we upload. See you on the next one. Thanks.